Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
This is an island surrounded by water, big water, ocean water. Trust me, I'm like a smart person. I'm very consistent. I'm a very stable genius. I had the best words. Tolerate. I know words. Mike Pounds. I hope they now go and take a look at the oranges of the investigation. But there's no better word than stupid. Anonymous, really anonymous. I'm very highly educated. One of the wettest we've ever seen from the standpoint of water. I had the best words. God bless the United States.
Around the nation, Waldorf Nation, welcome to the show, everybody. It is Wednesday. We've got a lot of stories we want to go through. We've got, of course, an update on what's going on in Kenosha, including a shooting that happened last night. And so we've got some very important updates on that. We're going to talk about Michael Cohen. We've got the, a segment from the RNC. We'll talk about that and how Tennessee is stripping the right to vote. So that's a very important story as well in regards to the protests. So we've got a lot of stuff. Going to be a great show. So stay with us. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Very important to do so. Helps us out greatly as always. Now, before we get into the show, as I said before, please like the stream, subscribe, all that stuff. We're doing a fundraiser. I don't know if you guys know this. I haven't been really pushing it as much. We've got a GoFundMe. It is in the description of the chat. I'm going to try to raise money for a better show streaming computer, so we can do more things and have it, look better and not be so slow and a potato. So if you want to help out, the link is in the description of the chat as well, or link is in the chat to help us out. We're also doing a new gaming channel. So you might have seen me promoted a little bit in the, basically in the community feed and on social media. So it's just where, I will do some game streams by myself and with my friends and have some fun. And so, and we talk a little bit about politics, which is fun as well. And so we're doing that. So, yeah, if you want to help us out, subscribe to that channel as well. And just, see me game outside of politics a little bit and what I do to relax. So that said, let's dive into the show. We'll start out with Michael Cohen's ad, which is devastating. Michael Cohen, Donald Trump's former right-hand man and fixer, has a message for America.
For more than a decade, I was President Trump's right-hand man, fixer, and confidant. I was complicit in helping conceal the real Donald Trump. I was part of creating an illusion. Later this week, he's going to stand up and blatantly lie to you. I'm here to tell you he can't be trusted, and you shouldn't believe a word he utters. So when you watch the president this week, remember this. If he says something is huge, it's probably small. If he says something will work, it probably won't. And if he says he cares about you and your family, he certainly does not. He's going to tell you that if you re-elect him, the economy will bounce back, that only he can get us out of this economic crisis.
I alone can fix it.
Maybe for those like him. But if you think he cares about working class Americans, you're dead wrong. The president is going to talk to you about law and order. That's laughable. Virtually everyone who worked for his campaign has been convicted of a crime or is under indictment, myself included. So when the president gets in front of the cameras this week, remember that he thinks we're all gullible, a bunch of fools. I was a part of it, and I fell for it. You don't have to like me, but please listen to me.
All right, so there's a lot about that, right? So let's kind of break it down. So first off, I love the dig at Donald Trump. Look, it was obviously an anti-Trump ad. It's just going to be full of them. But I just love the part where he said, well, if the president says something is big, it's actually pretty small. You could hear him chuckle a little bit on that one. So that was pretty good. So otherwise, powerful ad, actually. And so now here's the thing about Michael Cohen, right? Michael Cohen's a snake. I've said Michael Cohen's a snake for a long time. I know. Don't use animal references, that disparage animals for a human, that whole thing. Animals are innocent, right? But in this case, no, he's a bad person. That said, everything he said is true. It's true. Yes, he knew the guy. He worked for the guy. He lied for the guy and went to prison for the guy. And so, yeah, if you end up going to prison for Donald Trump, you're going to be pretty unhappy about it. And so I understand that, right? And so now the thing about this is exactly the kind of guy that Donald Trump attracts. I mean, the type of environment he fosters. I mean, look at Michael Cohen, Roger Stone, Paul Manafort, Rick Gates. It's not an accident that these people happen to have been arrested in Donald Trump's orbit. It's because criminality runs in that circle. That's who they are. And it runs in, and it also, look, the fish rots from the head down, basically. And so the thing about Trump is that even though he's pretty terrible at everything he does, he still gets people around him. He's got something that I don't have, right? An engaging personality, and this streak of narcissism that attracts people to him. Very charismatic person, very entertaining, kind of like a clown, but some people really like the clown because not only is he entertaining, but again, there's got a certain charm to him, right? And so that's what gets people to be on his side. That's what gets people to do crimes on his behalf. And so that's what happens. And so the entire White House, you have to understand too, that the entire White House is shaped exactly like the Trump organization, filled with family members, sycophants, criminals, and people who want to get rich. And of course, there are people with obviously a combination of those factors, criminals who want to get rich, et cetera, et cetera. And so, as I said before, Donald Trump, he's a narcissist. They have an uncanny ability to suck people in. They have an effect on them. And so, is it a stretch to see that would happen? No, not at all. That said, is Michael Cohen a good person? No. No, he's not a good person. He never was a good person, which made him predisposed to working for Donald Trump. That said, that's why you should probably take his words, pretty seriously here, because he is that type of person. And now, for the first time in his life, he's actually telling the truth. I know, right? And so I really hope that, people understand and get that message that Donald Trump is a criminal. Donald Trump is exactly that kind of person to foster this kind of corruption. And I'm not saying that Joe Biden is a great choice either, right? Joe Biden's got a lot of problems. I pointed that out before. But at the same time, I think if Donald Trump gets another 4 years, it's going to kind of make what we've been through already look kind of tame. I mean, think about it. The grift is going to get turned up to 11, right, if he wins again, as well as the criminality, because not only would he be above the law, but then he could claim mandate. Well, hey, I got to mandate the American people had a choice. They chose me again because we had another 2016 type election. And now I'm 100% above the law. Again, imagine now if everything he's done and tried to do is validated in November with another win. It's not going to do. It's not going to go very well. And so I'm really concerned about this. And so I think for the first time, I've ever, said this, but maybe we should actually listen to Michael Cohen and not reelect Donald Trump. All right. It's a pretty short and sweet message. So let's move on. Let's go to the RNC. So last night was the second night of the Republican National Convention. And one of the speakers was former Florida Attorney General and Trump defense attorney Pam Bondi. And what she talked about in her 6-minute speech is how Joe Biden is corrupt and basically is guilty of nepotism. Take a look.
At the Democrats' convention, we were told to look at Joe Biden as the model of integrity. But when you look at his 47-year career in politics, the people who benefited are his family members, not the American people. Let's take a closer look. We all know about Joe's son, Hunter Biden. A corrupt Ukrainian oligarch put Hunter on the board of his gas company, even though he had no experience in Ukraine or in the energy sector. None. Yet he was paid millions to do nothing. Hunter only resigned from that board just before his dad announced his campaign for president. Now let's talk about China. Fact: Joe Biden flew to China on Air Force Two with Hunter along for the ride. They said he was just there as a family member, but we know that's untrue. In Beijing, Hunter didn't just go sightseeing. He had meetings with his Chinese bank partners. Hunter even arranged for his dad to meet with one of the partners. 10 days later, those Chinese communist bankers approved millions to go to Hunter's firm. There have been numerous press reports that have shown other close Biden family members benefited from Joe's 47-year political career. Joe Biden was point person on Iraq. The president of a construction firm met with Biden's team in the White House, and then who did they hire to build thousands of houses in Iraq? Joe Biden's close family member. These aren't isolated incidents. It is a deliberate pattern of conduct. And that's just what he did as vice president. Imagine what he'd do as president.
Yeah, imagine what he would do as president. Appoint family members to be in his cabinet as, advisors and things like, oh, wait, we already have that. Look, it's pretty funny to have someone at the RNC talk about nepotism, which, by the way, is actually a real problem in politics. We see it all the time. We see corruption. We see special deals for families. We just see, family names carry a lot of weight in dynastic politics. And so all of that are actually legitimate problems. But at the same time, it's kind of the wrong family and wrong person to kind of point that out. I mean, look, it was pointed out, interestingly enough, that half of the keynote speakers at Tuesday night's RNC were literal Trump family members. And so, look, this graphic kind of points it out. So, look, take a look. Pam Bondi talking about nepotism. And here you've got next Tiffany, Eric, and Melania. Oops. And look, that's just, okay, whatever, speakers, right? Look, if the Biden brought a bunch of people to go and speak with, on behalf of him at the DNC, or if he had, okay, who cares, right? But you want to talk about nepotism? Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation, okay? So I mentioned the two advisors, Jared and Ivanka Trump. What do they do in the White House? They're advisors of the president, right? So what have they done? Nothing. Really nothing of value. Jared Kushner is just as incompetent as his father-in-law, Donald Trump. And by the way, he's in charge of peace in the Middle East. What has he done? How's that going? Not very well, actually. Now, Ivanka, she is supposed to be empowering women and to be a moderating force on her father. Well, how's that going? Also, unsurprisingly, not very well. Mary Trump, by the way, Donald Trump's niece, said this about Ivanka, quote, "She doesn't do anything. She spouts bromides on social media, but either she tries to have an impact and fails, or just isn't interested in having an impact at all. I can't think of one thing she's done to show that she's moderate or a moderating influence. I can't think of one thing using her family connections to get favorable trade deals with China." Yeah, I notice how Pam Bondi's like, I can't believe they would do meet deals with the Chinese Communist Party. Oh my God. And yet, when President Donald Trump was meeting with President Xi of China, Ivanka was able to get favorable deals for her merchandise. Interesting how that works out. Gee, using her family connections to get special deals for herself and her businesses? No, she would never. As for Jared Kushner, he used his connections to try to prop up his money pit of a property in New York City as he slumlords during a deadly pandemic that his father has done nothing about. Nothing. But yeah, okay, let's have a conversation about Hunter Biden. Okay, I'm open to that conversation. Why? It's because I don't like corruption, regardless of party. So I'm completely fair and transparent about that. That's why I think Biden was actually a really poor choice for the Democratic nominee, because he has all of this baggage, this systemic corruption, as opposed to Trump's personal corruption. So again, Biden made some money off the Ukrainian gas company because he's a Biden. Were they definitely trying to curry favor? Of course. Yes, the Ukrainian government, kind of corrupt. There's some corruption going on there. And so is the American government. I know, big surprise, right? And so, again, we talk about this systemic corruption that happens both in Ukraine as well as in America. Yeah, we can have that conversation. I would love to root out all the corruption. But again, this is the pot calling the kettle black. The Trumps are also making money off their family name and off of politics. And so that whole family is basically in on the grift. And so, yes, I don't like the Hunter Biden thing, but you're definitely calling the pot calling the kettle black. So now, speaking of that, right, Pam Bondi, really bad spokesperson for this, because Pam Bondi was actually going to look into Donald Trump's shady university when she was AG of Florida. Then she received a $25,000 donation from the Donald Trump Foundation, and later on, she shut down that investigation. By the way, the Trump Foundation is a sham charity group that once spent thousands of dollars on a picture of Donald Trump. So you want to talk about corruption? We got corruption everywhere, and it's in the White House right now. So now, I'm sure Pam Bondi's going to be very happy to have that conversation on that corruption, right? Right? Wouldn't it be nice to actually have a presidential candidate on either side to not be somewhat corrupt? That said, the level of corruption by the Trumps is unusual in the fact that it's much greater and much more transparent than other presidents. So that said, Pam Bondi, this did not get received well on social media. So I'm going to give you a couple of responses here. One person said, Pam Bondi is currently complaining about nepotism as she supports a man who inherited a fortune from his father and hired his daughter's husband as senior advisor. Kushner, of course. Another person pointed out, the RNC seriously followed up Pam Bondi's anti-nepotism speech with one given by the president's daughter. who, by the way, also is set to inherit millions of dollars from her father, as well as, of course, getting an excellent education. But she says, well, I mean, coronavirus, I definitely have been impacted by that. And the fact that it's going to be really hard for me to get a job. So I sympathize and I can empathize. I can see where everybody is, having a difficult time finding a job. No, you've got millions of dollars. Shut up. You're not helping, Tiffany. One other person says, speech by Pam Bondi about the evils of nepotism, followed by speech by Tiffany Trump. And finally, talk about hypocrisy, Pam Bondi lambasting Biden's nepotism with Tiffany, Eric, and Melania coming up next at the convention. And of course, there are many more, but you kind of get the gist of it here. This is what the Republican Party has become. This is what they are. They're the home of hypocrites, conspiracy theorists, perpetual victims, and of course, if you watch the first night, fascists. All right. Well, let's kind of switch gears on this one. All right. A black store owner in California was harassed by police who were not convinced that he owned his own clothing store. So now this happened in Tiburon, California. And a local news station, ABC7, had reported that Yima Khalif, owner of the Yima clothing brand and store, was approached by local police while he was working late inside his business around 1 a.m. last Saturday. So now he told ABC7, quote, this particular day, we had just received a huge inventory. We just wanted to come out and put the inventory out before Saturday morning. Well, that makes sense. Again, if you're running a business, yeah, you would want your inventory to be accessible. And yeah, if you've got nothing to do on a Friday night, why not? Okay, it's your business. Pretty much do whatever you want as long as you're not breaking any laws, right? But of course, that seemed to be too much for police, who immediately suspected that he was looting. So now there's video of this, but unfortunately, because of copyright issues dealing with local news, we're not able to show you that video, which is unfortunate. But basically, that video has the officer saying, this street closes at 9 and there's never anybody in here. This isn't regular business hours. There's no customers in there. Is it your store? That's all we want to know. I want to know what you're doing in this store at 1 o'clock in the morning. So basically they're demanding, hey, what are you doing here? This can't be your store, right? And he says, well, if I tell you it's my store, well, then what are you going to do? And then that's when the officer demanded to see proof. Well, then show me it's your store. Khalif responded, I don't have to show you anything. The officer then tells Khalif that he should be, quote, grateful that we're being as diligent as we are to look out for the street. And then thankfully, of course, this does not, lead to any arrests or any violence or, God forbid, anybody getting shot. They did go away after a neighbor finally said, that's his store. Leave him alone. I wonder if that neighbor was white, by the way. So look, I know some of you might be wondering, okay, hey, why didn't you just show him proof, right? It would have been easy for him to go and show him, hey, this is my store. It's literally named after me. Here's my ID, whatever, right? But that's not really the point, right? Why should you have to do that? I mean, like the assumption here, and this is the problem, the assumption here is that the black man in a store at 1 o'clock in the morning, well, it must not be his store. He must be up to no good. Well, wait. Would this happen to a white person in the same circumstances? I don't think that'd be the case. I mean, understand, that's an example of white privilege, okay? And so I know it's one of those charged words, right? Phrases, right? that immediately triggers some people, right? Oh, how dare you say we have privilege? But wait a minute. You do, in the fact that you have the benefit of the doubt. It doesn't mean that that you grow up and that you have things that are handed to you, like you grow up wealthy and you don't have any issues and, things like that. No. White privilege just means you get the benefit of the doubt, which means that people don't have certain assumptions when they see you on the street, right? When they don't have a certain image of you when you're walking down the halls, or when you get into an elevator, where a woman doesn't have to feel like she has to, clench her purse a little tighter, things like that. Okay. And so understand that police look at black people differently than they do white people. And that even counts for black police officers. And a lot of this has to do, of course, with the training. And so now, of course, other people will point out, hey, look, it's because black people happen to be more criminally inclined. Therefore, the police are more likely to look at them as if they're doing, if they're up to no good. Okay. So now there are statistics out there that do show that black people tend to commit more crimes than white people as a share of the population, right? But whenever that is presented, there's a lot of context that gets ignored. Okay. And of course, that's on purpose in order to paint black people as more criminal, inherently violent and criminal and things like that. And so now let me point out some of that context, right? That's important. For example, where you grow up, right? If you grow up in a place that's cash strapped and it doesn't have opportunity, well, you don't have as many options. Poor areas mean poorer schools. Poorer schools means less ability to advance in society, lack of decent jobs in areas with poor infrastructure. And of course, you have the demand for drugs, leading, of course, to more criminality for people to get by. I mean, think about this, right? Your options are in a certain area, making minimum wage at McDonald's, right? While watching your mom, work 2 jobs or 3 jobs to get by, minimum wage, still not being able to do so, having health problems. And you think, well, am I just going to go get a job at McDonald's and try to support my family? Or am I going to sell drugs where I make 5 times as much and there's a demand for it? I mean, it comes down to simple economics at this point, right? And then you get, some people get into that life and it's very, very difficult to get out. And so there's that. There's criminality. There's, as a result of more criminality, there's increased policing, which leads, of course, to more arrests. And it's been proven that, of course, black people tend to get more harsher sentences, which means more people in prison, which means also more people rotating in and out of prison for crimes like possession and all that stuff, on and on and on. And you've got different contexts for, different people in different situations. And if you don't involve that context, and this is why it's important to bring that up, if you don't believe in that, bringing in that kind of context and only say, well, we've got statistics saying that black people are more violent and more criminal. Well, then what's your explanation for it? If you don't involve that context? Well, I think a lot of people who present it without context, knowingly so, will try to point out a genetic factor, right? And they'll try to say things like, they're just more predisposed to crime. That's it. Because they're genetically, and then they'll go down this road that you don't want to go down, right? And those people are white supremacists. And so understand that, right? And there is, unfortunately, white supremacy in policing. And so that's another huge problem. But as far as Yima is concerned, this guy's a small business owner, a pillar of the community. He's a job creator. Okay. And so, unfortunately, though, police seem to see him as a potential criminal. And they say that, and it's just a gall to say that, yeah, you know what, you should be grateful that we're paying such attention, that we care enough to go and harass you in your own store for doing your own thing. And so, look, here's the thing. I've come to the realization, over the last few months, and I know maybe I was being a little naive, but cops aren't there to protect people. Cops are there to protect property, and that's it. They also, by the way, only solve a very small amount of crime. I mean, the data shows that consistently over the decades, fewer than half of all serious crimes are reported to police. And if so, few, if any, arrests are made in those cases. About 11% of all serious crimes result in an arrest and about 2% in a conviction. As I said before, half of all crimes are not reported. And arrests, let's be honest, are not a great metric of solving crime. And I actually think that outcomes are far more important, far more interesting to look at when it comes to policing, right? And so those are important caveats, right? But really, when you look at the data, it kind of calls into question what the purpose of policing really is. Why should we pump so much money into these police, outfits if they're really barely solving any crime? You look at this result. I mean, why? Why should we justify the billions of dollars going to these police departments when we see the outcome, which happens to be, primarily harassing and killing black people in their own communities? And so, again, they don't solve crimes. Out of all serious crimes reported to police, only 4.1% of cases ended with an individual convicted in the wake of a police reported crime. So, what are they there for? You could say, hey, there's some prevention, right? Okay, but where's the numbers for that? Like, I'm interested in the data here. Okay. But again, I think the real reason is, for one, to protect property, to defend the elites, and in some cases, promote white supremacy. I mean, another story that we'll get into, right? Where police worked with right-wing militias, white supremacist groups, to shut down black protests that were peaceful. The cops would take the side of these right-wing armed militias instead of trying to protect the protesters. And so they were actively against, and understand, peaceful protesters, right? Where they constantly shut down peaceful protest. That's a nuanced conversation, right? And that's a further conversation that we need to look into further. But as far as Yuma is concerned, the state of our policing today and the state of our news today, I'm just glad that he didn't get arrested for the number one crime in America, and that it would be disrespecting a police officer. Okay. I'm going to take a break. We're going to come back. We've got the Kenosha. We're going to talk about what's going on a little bit in Kenosha, Wisconsin. And then we've got, of course, Tennessee's plan to not only go after protesters, but also to prevent them from voting. So stay right here. We'll be back. We'll take some comments as well. Thank some channel members and all that stuff right after this break around the nation.
Uh-oh, I'm in trouble.
Tighten up my meat.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
I like my meat tight.
Welcome back to the show, Around the Nation, right here, Waldorf Nation. So I want to read off some patrons first. Thanks some patrons for supporting the show, as well as some channel members. So I want to thank Echo the Cat and Sasha Whiteford. Animal theme today. Interesting. Channel members, let's see. Island Rogue 4568 and Jeremy Hughes. Thank you for signing up to support independent progressive media. We've got a fundraiser going on, of course, that we're at. We're about 20% on raising $2,500 to, of course, get me a better setup here. So if you guys can help out, I know it's difficult with coronavirus, but if you can drop a couple of bucks, I'd appreciate it. All right. So that said, a couple of comments that I wanted to read as well from the break. Harriet Gar says, cops are the arm of the state that is to keep us all in line for the ruling class. Nothing more than property protectors for the wealthy. That's what the slave patrols were. Well, I mean, only the wealthy have property, right? Can I vote Biden and keep my penis? No, you must hand up over your penis. No penis is allowed. Obviously, it's a joke. I know you're trolling, but it's kind of funny, so I'll allow it. I'll allow it today. All right. And then Goku just says, I worked in my family's furniture showroom late at night next to a police emergency call room. Never once had an officer come over to question me. Guess my race. I think we all know. I think we all know. All right. Fun times. Let's move on. Let's talk about what's going on in Kenosha, because very serious issues going on here. So following the near-fatal shooting of a black man by police officers, protests have erupted in Kenosha, Wisconsin for the third night. So now it got violent as protesters clashed with apparently armed militias and police. So now gunshots were reported during the night. According to some of the Kenosha sheriffs, 3 people were shot, 1 wounded, 2 apparently were dead. And the sheriff's office said that they were investigating whether the shooting had resulted between a conflict between protesters and a group of men with weapons who claimed to have been protecting businesses. So were they protecting businesses? I don't think so. I don't think, I don't know what you believe, right? But I think that it had nothing to do with, protecting businesses and everything to do with going out and doing some Klan-style vigilante justice against uppity black people. I mean, look, apparently police in Kenosha are not known for dealing fairly with black residents. Part of this involved police officers actually not having any sort of body cameras. And so, the camera that caught Jacob Blake being shot in the back about 7 times, even though he was apparently reportedly not armed. They said, oh, he's got a knife. They didn't find a knife on him. There was no reports of said knife or no reports of said gun. So I haven't seen anything come out about that. And so his biggest crime was disrespecting a police officer by walking away. I didn't know that was a capital crime. Even if it was maybe a misdemeanor or just rude, right? Definitely not a capital crime that you should be shot for. And of course, we had more details of where apparently they were wrestling or something, wrestling around. He was getting punched, Blake was, by police officers for something, and then got up. And then allegedly there was, again, a police officer said, oh, he's got a knife. And then a lot of things obviously don't seem to match up. the police account and the account from the witnesses, who again say that Blake was not armed with a weapon. So that said, as far as police in Kenosha, how they treat some of their black residents, well, David Holman was a college student in Kenosha and reported that he told the New York Times, that he would get stopped all the time by police for not doing anything. Quote, "It was so bad that my white friends on campus said, David, you get pulled over way too much. From now on, when we go places, we're going to drive." So wait, so he's walking around campus and he's constantly getting stopped by the cops when not doing anything. Well, that's weird. Why would they do that? Why would that happen? Well, Mr. Hallman is black. And he said he continued to be hassled by police even after he was an elected official. So now at age 23, he was elected to Kenosha's County Board of Supervisors. Hallman, who resigned from the county board back in 2018, is the founder and musical director of the Black String Triage Ensemble in Milwaukee, a group that plays at crime scenes after shootings as a way to help heal the community. He said, quote, "What's going on in Kenosha now was born out of all of the nasty and all of the awful that I saw and experienced when living in that town." So, now that said, right? Does this guy sound like a thug to you? I mean, again, here's a guy who was walking around college, right? And gets stopped by the police for no reason. I mean, aren't the police only supposed to go after the bad guys? Well, if you're not a thug and a criminal, I hear that you're fine, that you should be okay, right? I mean, go anywhere in the country, though, and ask a black person minding their own business, right, how often they get stopped by police. If you actually care about justice, then first you'll be surprised, and then you'll be infuriated how often it happens, because it happens all the time. And not only that, but police tend to shoot unarmed black people also all the time. It's now, now that we have cell phone footage, it's getting out there. And that's why, understand, this is why buildings are on fire right now, okay? What it is, it's a cry for help from people who are constantly harassed, targeted, and murdered by institutional powers. And what's interesting about the preponderance of cell phone video now is that same cell phone video brings out protesters and also counter-protesters, right-wing white supremacist militias, who actively, by the way, work with police officers against protesters. They say, no, we're just out here to protect property from the rioters and the looters, right? And look, I'm not saying that rioting hasn't happened. I'm not saying looting hasn't happened. I'm not saying that it's a good thing to do those things. In fact, look, Jacob Blake's mother strongly pushed back against that and said, that does not represent my son at all. Okay, don't do that. We don't want violence. We don't want looting, right? We don't want this stuff to happen. But at the same time, again, when you have, protesters that come out that are primarily, like majority peaceful, right? These protests are. You actually have not only a police overreaction, right? Firing tear gas into crowds, but then you get these right-wing militias that come out. And I think one of their main things is not to, again, to protect property. No, it's to go out and shoot themselves some N-words. That's what it is. And so a good example of that is a shooter that was just arrested that's identified as 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. So now he was a 17-year-old member of a militia group that went out there and, claimed, again, to protect property and ended up shooting and killing 2 people, allegedly. So now Rittenhouse is charged on Wednesday with first-degree intentional homicide in a shooting late Tuesday during a clash between protesters and protesters of police brutality, of course, and again, these militia members. The militia members said that they had gathered to protect a gas station from what they called looters and vandals. And so I actually have video of kind of the aftermath of that. But first, before I do that, I just want to show video of police officers not thanking the militia, including Rittenhouse, who's in this video, and offering them water. So let's take a look at that.
Okay, thank you guys. You need water? Seriously. Guys far right, you need water. We need water. We'll throw you one. Thank you. All right, come on guys, let's get out of here. Damn. Which way should we go? Okay, we'll take a couple, for a couple. Thank you. Yes, you. You are a civilian. This area is closed to them. You're trespassing. Leave. Leave now.
Can you throw it up here? Officer, can you throw it up?
We got a couple. We got to save a couple, but we'll give you a couple. We appreciate you guys. We really do.
We appreciate you guys. We really do. Yes, so much appreciation. It's so good that we have these militia members shooting people in the streets, right? No, okay, understand this is before the shooting happened, but nonetheless, these people are obviously armed with weapons, AR-15s, and so, I mean, they're out there with I think with a purpose, and that is to actually use those weapons, and one of them did use his weapon, and so I want to show you some video of that, and then what happened right after the shots were fired. And this is going to blow your mind.
Hey, he just shot them! Hey, dude right here just shot them! Dude right here just shot all of them down there! That dude just shot them right there! That dude right here! Yeah.
Injured straight ahead. Someone injured straight ahead.
All right, so you could see, right? That was Rittenhouse right after he shot and killed 2 people. He ran up and he said, okay, I'm going to surrender myself to police, to the Kenosha police. And what happened? Kenosha police ignored him. Nah, we're too busy going after the protesters still. And so he tried to surrender and then was like, well, if they're going to ignore me, I guess I'm just going to have to, I'm going to leave. He left the state. He left the state and went back to Antioch. So he went back home. He went back home. And then at his home, it's reported that he had turned himself in back in his hometown. But realized that at the time, the Kenosha police didn't even try. They didn't even see. He's up there saying, oh, yeah, I kind of shot. Like, I didn't hear anything, him actually say that, but he's got his arms up and he's going by the police, cruisers, the police line. Completely ignored. Oh, you probably just shot 2 rioters. Who cares? Who cares? Oh, and by the way, we appreciate you. Need any water? I mean, we got some water for you. Like, understand, okay? This is who they are. Okay, we know who the Kenosha police are. We know what you're all about. And we also know what the right-wing groups are really there for. Okay, this is why they bring their guns, right? You don't have to go and protest with a gun. Okay, especially because the protesters don't bring guns. But everywhere they go, you've got these right-wing groups that are armed. They've got to bring their weapons everywhere. Why? There's only one reason you bring a weapon. It's because you're ready to use it. And in some cases, you can't wait to use it. You can't wait to use it. And so now, understand that, like, this guy is going to be celebrated on the right as a hero. Like, we know it's already begun, right? He's a hero. He's a martyr for the right. He's shooting thugs, right? And so while they celebrate him, they attack and smear and defame the man who was shot 7 to 8 times in the back for basically no reason. This is America. This is white supremacy, and white supremacy is a gigantic part of American culture. All right. The Republican-controlled government of Tennessee is trying to kill two birds with one stone. First, trying to stop protesters of police brutality, and also preventing those protesters from voting. You know, just in case they try to use the electoral system to try to bring about some change. So now Tennessee protesters, according to the Associated Press, will face harsh penalties if they are protesting, including losing the right to vote as punishment for participating in protests under a law enacted by the Tennessee General Assembly. Governor Bill Lee quietly signed off on this bill over a week ago, and under the law, demonstrators who camp out on state property as a result of protest can now be charged with a Class E felony, punishable by up to 6 years in prison, rather than as a misdemeanor as it was previously. And so understand, right, that in Tennessee, if you camp out on public property as a result of protest, right, or a part of protest, you can go to prison for 6 years and lose your right to vote. Now, look, this is in direct response to protests on Black Lives Matter. Since Floyd's killing earlier this year, protesters have camped outside the Tennessee Capitol in Nashville. Their demands are simple: meeting with the governor to discuss racial inequality and police brutality. Now, the protesters set up a camp at a war memorial plaza near the Capitol, naming it the People's Plaza and the Ida B. Wells Plaza, right? And so whatever name that they're going with, it doesn't really matter. I kind of like People's Plaza, to be honest with you, because that's what it is. That's what our tax money is paying for. And so, nonetheless, they stayed there 24 hours a day for more than 2 months to try to demand, again, some racial justice. And yet, the governor refuses to acknowledge them or meet with them, but instead just said, oh yeah, we're just going to throw you in prison. He's basically telling you, know your place. Know your place. I mean, there's a secondary effect as well, as I mentioned before, and that's getting rid of the vote. Tennessee is one of the 21 states that punish felons by taking away their right to vote, and Governor Lee made it clear that this threat is meant as a warning to the Black Lives Matter protesters who've called for racial justice. And so, look, interestingly enough, I was actually watching something. I was up late last night, and I was watching something on the Ku Klux Klan, right? And what they were doing when they were first created. It was started by 6 former Confederates, right? And their main goal, the main goal of the KKK, was to stop Black people from using their electoral power to get involved in electoral politics. That's it. And so they would go around and they would terrorize people. They would use superstition against them, and claim that they're the ghosts of slain Confederates, and they would terrorize Black people into not voting. And so understand that this is a continuation of that has been institutionalized in government in 21 states. Obviously, they're all southern states, and say, well, if you're a felon, if you go to prison for anything, we're going to take away your right to vote. We're going to disenfranchise you. Now, I think that, hey, look, if you, do the crime, you do the time. And once you're out, you should be able to get your rights back, right? And you should be able to get especially the right to vote back. And so, unfortunately, these are Republicans. And so they're like, well, no, we don't want you to get your vote back because you're not going to vote for us because we put you in prison for trying to demand racial justice. Yeah, of course we're not going to let you get those back. And so that's what's going on, right? And so this is openly and transparently political and also pretty evil. I mean, it's dastardly, to use a word. And so obviously there's a lot of criticism here. For example, Kristen Clark, president and executive director of the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law, says, quote, "The racial motivation underlying this law is undeniable. It's a direct response to Black Lives Matter and to those who are resolutely opposed to racial injustice and police violence, to criminalize protest activity and disenfranchise voters on top of it, defies principles that lie at the heart of our democracy," which means, getting a lot more people involved, obviously. "It's an abuse of state power intended to silence voices of dissent from the streets to the ballot box." So not only will we not listen to you while we're in the streets, right? But we're also going to make it so that you cannot vote any sort of change. Disaster. So now here's the thing. If you're siding with the state of Tennessee, understand that you're being un-American. I know that's a heavy charge, right? But protest is uniquely American. I mean, look, you might want to pick up a history book if you think otherwise, right? Because this country is littered with examples of protests, many of which actually had become violent. And now the thing is, even though I abhor violence, I'm a pacifist. I think that, if you look at the history of this country, we got some of the most major change from acts of not only civil disobedience, but outright rioting and looting. And so this is what happens in America. This is our history, right? I mean, the history of labor, for example, is basically rife with people picking up guns to say, that's it, I'm going to fight against both the corporations and the state to fight for my labor rights so that I can have a weekend, I can have a 40-hour work week, I can actually make enough money to, support my family. And that's something that I'm going to pick up a gun for. And so the history of this country is part of that, right alongside, of course, the history of white supremacy. And so it's part of our DNA. And unfortunately, we have forgotten our DNA. France, you look at France, they'll protest basically anything. And they'll do so with the vigor that we in America used to have when it came to rights, civil rights, as well as labor rights, as well as human rights. And so, I don't know, maybe we should be one of those people to bring back that spirit in certain ways. And so now, one more quote here from ACLU of Tennessee Executive Director Hetty Weinberg. They said, quote, "We are very disappointed in Governor Lee's decision to sign this bill, which chills free speech," another thing Republicans tend to say that they agree with, but actually don't, "undermines criminal justice reform and fails to address the very issues of racial justice and police violence raised by the protesters who are being targeted. While the governor often speaks about sentencing reform, this bill contradicts those words and wastes valuable taxpayer funds to criminalize dissent." Again, what happened to free speech? Do we have free speech or don't we? Okay. Look, if you believe in free speech, then, you would actually be in favor of protest. And you would actually be in favor of peaceful protest. But every time there is one, you say, oh no, let's crack down on it. We don't want the peaceful protest. Or they try to conflate it with some of the protest that does inevitably get violent. So I think they're more in favor of cracking brown skulls than they are of actually promoting real free speech. I mean, look, as an example here, protest organizer Justin Jones told the Washington Post that there was no violent behavior by the protesters, but the violence actually came from state troopers who dragged us down the Capitol stairs. Quote, "This is all about criminalizing peaceful protesting. Everything we've done is the spirit of non-violence. This will not deter us from pushing forward and challenging these laws, both in the courts and in the streets. This just confirms that we must continue." And so, hey, look, That's what's going on here. So here's Tennessee trying to crack down both on voting rights and on free speech, the right to protest. If you're an actual principled conservative and not a racist white supremacist, well, then you would be in favor of allowing protests to continue, even if you don't necessarily agree with them, because that is actually free speech. All right. Ooh, we got some trolls up in here. Fun times. That's nice. You have the right to peaceably assemble, not riot. Yeah, tell that to the history books. And look, the people who, riot and eventually got rights from that, yeah, they were breaking the law too. So was secession by the, Confederates. That's also kind of against, not only against the law, obviously, because you can't secede from the country, but also, against America. So that's what you're caping for, guys. Understand that. All right. That's all I got for you guys today. Thank you for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream, and we'll see you guys later around the nation.
Tighten up my meat. Tighten up my meat. I like my meat tight.
Why? You're getting nervous, man.
Mike Pounds. Tolerate.
Please clap. You're kicking me out the door. You're kicking me out the door.